This is Combat Mania on the Undetermined Podcast Network.
You're listening to Combat Mania, a cheap seat sports production, part of the Undetermined Podcast Network. It's episode number 2. Hello everybody, once again, I am Tom Albano, and once again I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to Combat Mania. Last week we had our premiere episode, and I thought it was pretty well received, and I'd like to thank you, dedicated listeners who do listen into the show already. We got a lot of good stuff to talk about this week, and I promise a lot of good stuff to come in the future. So please spread the word about this show. Facebook, Twitter, GroupMe, Instagram, whatever the technology you use is, whatever social media you use to get the word out on stuff. We do have a lot of stuff to talk about today, and we will get into the different segments. We are going to start off with boxing. Well, we will, but first I do want to have a little a side piece, since technically start off with wrestling, but we're not going to do any big, we're not going to have any big transition into it right now, only because this isn't a light subject. For those of you who are not aware, Bobby Heenan, the legendary manager of professional wrestling, the brain, the longtime manager of guys such as Andre the Giant, Arn Anderson, Brainbusters, Haku, the Heenan family, that stable back in the day, the Heenan family. Bobby the Brain Heenan unfortunately passed away on Sunday the 17th, age 73. Don't have too much information about Bobby Heenan's death. The news was first reported on Twitter at about, I want to say, 5 o'clock-ish. 5 o'clock-ish, 6 o'clock-ish by Jim Ross. According to the initial stuff I have in front of me, Ross, or at least Ross, said he was surrounded by family. Bobby had been sick before his death, of course, because he has had numerous health issues within the last 15 years of his life. Throat cancer, a couple of falls and hospitalizations, jaw infection. Before his death, he faced a lot of health problems, and unfortunately, on Sunday the 17th, according to his daughter, he suddenly passed away. Bobby Heenan, of course, a legendary figure in the world of professional wrestling. Probably one of the greatest managers, one of the greatest heel managers, hell, just even one of the greatest heels and color commentators in the professional wrestling industry. Of course, he was with the AWA for about 10 years. That's when he first became, the brain, managing the likes of Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens, I believe Ken Patera too, and of course he did, that's the AWA, for those of you who don't know, the American Wrestling Association, which is one of the big name promotions before, of course, the WWF. Now WWE rose up and took that number one spot. Heenan originally started in the AWA, and of course Heenan, as we all know, was one of the big villains in the heyday of professional wrestling. Heenan always seemed to be at ends with Hulk Hogan back in the WWF days. And as I said, he was one of the bigger heels, so Hogan and Heenan's feud actually had its roots in the AWA as a part of the Nick Bockwinkel-Hulk Hogan feud. Of course, Nick Bockwinkel never really dropped the title to Hulk Hogan, and sooner sooner than later, Hulk Hogan ended up in the WWF, and that's where Heenan went. Heenan eventually did go to the WWF. He gave his notice to the AWA and to the Gagne family and moved over to WWF, managing the likes, as I said, of Andre the Giant, of Ken Patera again, of Paul Orndorff, King Kong Bundy, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Rick Rude, Harley Race, Haku. He basically had the Heenan family. He was one of them, and basically he was one of the biggest villains in the game. Of course, Bobby Heenan was in the corner of several participants at several of the first few WrestleManias. At WrestleMania 2, managing King Kong Bundy, to the ring for his Steel Cage Championship match with Hulk Hogan. At WrestleMania 3, he accompanied Andre the Giant to wrestle Hulk Hogan. And he didn't accompany Adrian Adonis. That was Jimmy Hart, I think. But WrestleMania 5, managing Rick Rude against the Ultimate Warrior. And Rick Rude actually won the title. Rude was always the manager of what seemed to be like villains who never really, won championships. But at that point, Rude and his family then started winning titles. Rick Rude won the Intercontinental Championship. I think it was Andre the Giant and Haku. Was that the Colossal Connection? I believe it was. And they were the tag team champions from 1989 up until WrestleMania 6 in 1990. Bobby Heenan then went over in his later years to the WCW. Before I get into his WCW years, of course, Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby Heenan. I should have started with this. They are one of the greatest commentary teams ever in professional wrestling, in my honest opinion, and a lot of fans' opinions. They were just so witty. They played off each other so well. The classic good guy, bad guy commentator. They had the chemistry. And Heenan he had some of the most amazing lines as a color commentator and heel manager. When he was managing Ric Flair in the early 90s, coming up with the lines like, "That's not fair to Flair." When Shawn Michaels turned on Marty Jannetty, and Shawn Michaels threw Jannetty through the glass window. And probably one of my favorite lines ever, Heenan saying that Jannetty was trying to be a coward and jumped through the window to try to escape. That was great. Oh, that's one of my favorites. That never gets old. One of my buddies, his name is Carlos. Whenever he talked about Heenan and Monsoon, one of his favorite things is it was a Mother's Day episode of, I think, Superstars, and it's Monsoon and Heenan at not the commentary table where the commentators used to stand and do their opening spiels, and they're talking about how it's Mother's Day, and Heenan says something about how his mother bought him a gift, and Monsoon's just flipping on him. And Monsoon's like, "Are you out of your mind?" And they just were amazing together. And of course, one of my favorites, when Heenan would have all his little quippy, witty comebacks or one-liners, and then he would just trigger something in Monsoon where Monsoon would either have like this, "Oh, please," or "Will you stop?" The "Will you stop" is probably my favorite line when it comes to that team of Monsoon and Heenan. Of course, my favorite Heenan line out of that is the Gennady line, to which Monsoon goes something like, "Are you kidding?" I'm going to be rewatching a lot of Superstars later, it seems, because I need to hear those two again. Maybe, or I'll pop in some Tuesday Night Titans. It's not like they're at ringside, but Tuesday Night Titans is still good. But yeah, Heenan then went over to the WCW. He wasn't exactly a big fan of working there at WCW as a part of the broadcast team there. And of course, he basically had conflicts with some of the people there, including one noticeable conflict with Tony Schiavone when he was trying to pay tribute to Gorilla Monsoon, even though Monsoon never worked for WCW. But I mean, Heenan was just one of the classiest people ever in professional wrestling, one of the classiest people they ever known. And Heenan was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004. Tearfully, he wished that his friend Gorilla Monsoon was there. Years before, however, he first returned to the WWF. It was with Mean Gene Okerlund commentating the Gimmick Battle Royal WrestleMania 17, which was quite a unique match, to say the least. And then he made a couple appearances in TNA and other promotions. But, like I said, basically he had a lot of health problems later in his life. He had throat cancer in 2002, I believe. He had a bunch of surgeries in the last 15 years of his life. He broke a hip, his pelvis, as I said, throat cancer. And basically, over time, he struggled to talk. And he didn't sound the same as he did back in the old days. And whenever you looked at an appearance at him, for some reason, I would just go really sad, because it's like, the poor dude was just suffering. And I mean, I'm sad that he's gone, but I'm happy that Bobby Heenan is now in peace. So, from this humanoid and a bunch of the other humanoids here in the professional wrestling industry, Bobby the Brain Heenan, rest in peace. I hope you and Gorilla Monsoon are going to commentate many matches up in the big ring in the sky. Alright, so after that little tribute to Bobby Heenan, which I wanted to do first and foremost because, Heenan was one of the men. He was the man, or one of the guys of professional wrestling. One of, heels looked up to Bobby Heenan and saw Bobby Heenan as like an influence. Or at least managers also. They really saw him as an influence. And it's like if a heel had to pick a manager to manage them, even if it wasn't realistic, if it was like a dream manager, I bet you a bunch of heels today would be saying Bobby Heenan. Because he was just that much of an influence on the industry. So, that being said, let's get into the big news of boxing. So, let's get into the big story from this past week in combat sports. More specifically, this past weekend in combat sports. And that, of course, was the big boxing middleweight unified championship bout between Gennady Golovkin and Saul Canelo Alvarez. So I wonder what you guys all thought of the fight. I thought it was a great fight, truth be told. I know what everyone wants to say, and I'll get into that in a second, but I just want to give the fight some appreciation. As I said in the Periscope for this fight, and if you didn't know about Periscoping, well, guess what? Go to Periscope, and you can follow at Combat Mania UD. Follow it on Twitter and Periscope, and the night of big fights and pay-per-view stuff, so the UFC pay-per-views, or a fight like Gennady Golovkin versus Canelo Alvarez, before the event, I'll have a little talk previewing the fights, and then I'll do a post-show, kind of thing an hour or so after the event aired. So, after that little cheap plug, let's get into what the fight was like. And I thought the fight was fine. I thought it was an excellent fight. I thought it was a war. I thought this had match of the year caliber written all over it. I mean, from a name aspect, it kind of did. Gennady Golovkin, Canelo Alvarez, two of the biggest middleweights in boxing, two of the biggest boxers in the world today, two of the best boxers in recent history, if not all of history. Gennady Golovkin, who entering this fight, had knocked out all but four of his opponents, and Canelo Alvarez, who was entering this fight with only one loss and one draw against him. and that one loss being against an undefeated Floyd Mayweather. Just from a name aspect, this sounded great on paper, and it turned out to be, an amazing fight. To go a little more in depth onto the rounds and how I felt. So round 1 was kind of, I would say feeling out. I mean, for some people like Golovkin, it's a little surprising to have a feeling out kind of round, but I don't think it's, a big deal. I feel like it's very common in boxing where the first round or even the first 2 rounds are trying to get a feel of what your opponent's got and what they have planned. I mean, in MMA, that's the first minute or 2 of the whole fight, is feeling out your opponent and seeing what they've got, usually. Things started to pick up. I'm trying to think. I mean, rounds 2 and 3, a couple of people I saw had it for Alvarez, because he was landing more. And I think this is part of the argument for what I'm going to talk about later. But some people say that Alvarez did win the fight because he landed more, while Golovkin just had the, heavier punches. And some people are saying that was the case in rounds 2 and 3. And I can see what they're coming from, but I thought Golovkin, he wasn't exactly in a groove, but he kept pace with Canelo. And then round 3, I thought Golovkin had really started to, get things going and was starting to lay it into Canelo. And that was basically the fight. Canelo then kind of went to sleep. And I mean, Golovkin was just landing combinations. Golovkin was landing combinations and he was doing, he was comfortable. Round 5 was an absolute war. It was a punch fest. Round 5 was probably one of the best rounds of the fight. Golovkin seemed to be in control, continuing to round 6, round 7. Although Alvarez, it can be noted, he was doing some counter-punching. He had some good shots in himself, but like I said, Golovkin was landing the more significant punches, the one where you could tell Alvarez was pretty hurt by the shots. And round 8, Golovkin continued. Round 9 was kind of Canelo. I want to say Canelo was fighting. I mean, he was, but Golovkin hurt him pretty bad, and it was like he was stumbling around the ring a little, and like, oh no, this could be a knockdown, or this could be he tries to balance himself against the ropes, eats a bunch of punches, and the referee steps in. Round 9 and 10, it was where I was feeling, okay, this is it. This is where the fight's going to end. But Alvarez managed to survive, which shocked me. And then round 10 happened, and like, okay, this is probably where it's going to end. Meanwhile, you have Alvarez's trainer who's trying to basically pump him up. Like, okay, for these next 3 rounds, if you want to win this fight, you have to have the best 3 rounds of your fucking life. It looked like something out of a movie where I'm like, okay, he's done. And the trainer's like, no, you need to have like, you're going to do this. It's like a whole thing out of a freaking Rocky movie. And I mean, the round 10, Canelo just came out firing. I thought Canelo was in control of round 10. I thought he won that round. Round 11 was pretty close. All power punches all around. But I thought Canelo again had it. And in round 12, Canelo was just firing away. And then the last minute or so of the fight was a war, as it usually is. And man, it was just... It's got to be up there with Fight of the Year, in my book. In my book, Fight of the Year for this year for boxing, it's either got to be this fight, or what I think it probably will be Anthony Joshua versus Vladimir Klitschko. I thought those two were like, some of the best fights we could have seen in boxing, not just this year, but in like recent history. It's a shame that the Gennady Golovkin Canelo Alvarez fight, some of its media attention and some of its drawing power and such was kind of sapped out of it by the fight we had 3 weeks ago, the infamous Floyd Mayweather Conor McGregor bout. So it's kind of like, as much as the Floyd Mayweather Conor McGregor fight brought some praise, it's like these were two legitimate boxers. These two basically sold out the T-Mobile Arena, and it was hard to get a hotel reservation over there, from what I understand. I mean, the fight was insane, and it had a lot of hype among the boxing community, and the boxing world put a lot of expectations on this fight, and for the most part, I thought it delivered. And considering the outside factors, if you take those out, it did deliver. And then we went to the judges' scorecards. One judge scored the contest a 114-114 draw. One judge scored the contest 115-113 in favor of Golovkin, which I thought was correct. It was either 115-113 Golovkin or 116-112 Golovkin. That's what I was feeling. And then Judge... I can never pronounce this name for the life of me. I just call her Judge Bird. But it's Judge Adelaide, I think. Adelaide Bird. And she scored the fight 118-110 Alvarez. A split draw. Now, I could live with a split draw. And I said this on the Periscope. I said this on the post-show Periscope. If that score was not 118-110, if it was something like 115-113, or 116-112, or 114-114, I would think, okay, I can live with that. I would think, okay, you know what, that's fine. I can see where she's coming from, and it's a draw. I would have no problem with that. But 118-110? What the fuck was she thinking? 118 to 110 in favor of Alvarez. It baffles my mind sometimes how some of these judges are actually officials, have licenses to do this shit. It baffles me. Like, what the fuck? How do two judges score it the most even bout possible, or nearly the most even fight possible, and then you score 118-110? Now, those who had Canelo winning say you can kind of understand where Bird was coming from, in that, as I mentioned before, Alvarez was actually landing punches, not just the significant strikes. But I mean, come on, number one, some people who say Alvarez won, some people, not everybody, some people have legitimate arguments, but some people are just being, massive trolls on the internet. And number two, I can't justify 118-110 because, in my personal opinion, as I alluded to, at least 6 or 7 rounds, if not 8, in my opinion, were won by Gennady Golovkin. It's just amazing to me how this could be a thing. And Judge Bird, I need to pull her thing up again. I did this on the Periscope last night, but Judge Bird is one of the worst freaking judges that there is in both boxing and mixed martial arts. And now, the Nevada State Athletic Commission executive says that, about her judging, that sometimes you have a bad day, and basically everyone is trying to stand, not everybody, I'm saying, but, some executives are trying to stand by Bird, and, it was either a bad day or she saw the fight a different way. But it's just, wow. How could you have that bad of a day? And basically, people are calling for her suspension, but basically, this isn't the first time she had a controversy. Here's some information I'm just going to take from The Sun. I'm going to credit The Sun for this. But I did mention it last night, but I'm just going to read it for The Sun just so, it's something clear, something everybody can understand, and the information's in front of me. Joe Calzaghe versus Bernard Hopkins for the Ring Magazine's Light Heavyweight title in 2008. Most people said that Calzaghe was the winner. Here's the thing, one judge scored at 116, 111 Calzaghe. One judge scored at 115, 112. Hang on 1 second. I guess it wasn't exactly, Okay, never mind. Okay, so for some reason the Sun wrote British and Welsh fighter. But Bernard Hopkins is American, so it's like, if you're gonna use journalistic thing here, people, if you're gonna use, British, stay with British, in my personal opinion. Just don't, go Welsh. But then again, The Sun is a UK paper, so I guess kind of, me being an ignorant American, I guess. But there you go. 116, 111 Calzaghe, 115, 112, and Adley Birds had it 114, 113 in favor of Hopkins. Kind of ridiculous, but I guess. But she has just had some of the worst scorecards ever when it comes to both boxing and mixed martial arts. As I said, this is not the first time that she has had a controversy like this. Hang on, let me pull up her BoxRec profile. That's even better. Because I said this last... Bird was the only judge that scored it in favor of Hopkins. And Harold Letterman, by the way, for the record for that fight, had it 116, 111 Calzaghe. 2012, Rios Abril for the World Lightweight title for the WBA. Bird was the only one to score it in favor of Abril, who lost by split decision. She scored at 117, 111 in favor of Abril. The other two scored at 116, 112 and 115, 113 in favor of Rios. Although there are some who felt that Abril won that fight. Pavlik versus Lopez in 2011. Bird was the only one not to score the bout for Pavlik. But basically, she every time that there's a controversy, there are certain judges that are probably involved. Some, there are certain names when you hear them in mixed martial arts or in boxing. I'm trying to think of a couple of examples. I believe Sal D'Amato is one of them. When you hear Sal D'Amato and UFC or an MMA, any MMA promotion, I can hear MMA fans shouting, "Oh no, there better be a finish." Because they know if it goes to the judges, it's going to get screwed up. D'Amato is one of them. Cecil Peoples can be another one of them. But he's both, in my opinion, not the best kind of referee. Actually, in a lot of fans' opinions, not exactly a good referee or judge for that matter. And then you have Bird, who is just, whenever a fight happens in Vegas, usually she might be there, and it's like, oh God, why? Bird says that she doesn't believe in scoring even rounds, and she feels that there should be a winner of each round, which, by the way, the 10-9 scoring system, that rule for boxing and MMA, in my opinion, is absolute bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Why? Why must there be a winner for each round? Because clearly that's been getting us nowhere but freaking trouble. It has. It really has. Has there been any good to come out of 10-9 rounds lately? And I mean, the mixed martial arts community, they're even more in a fry because freaking the new unified rules versus the old unified rules. Some states have passed it, some athletic commissions haven't passed it. So, and then new rules, they want more 10-8 rounds, not as many 10-9 rounds. So what constitutes as a 10-9 versus a 10-8? It's like, my brain just freaking exploded. For you kiddies who don't know about Pride Fighting Championship was something amazing back in the day. You can see roots of it now with, I guess, Ryzen. But basically, it was a Japanese MMA promotion. And there was some stuff that you can't do in the UFC that were allowed in Pride, like stomps, elbows to the head, elbows to the grounded opponents. I think the 12-6 elbow was legal in the Pride. But like I said, you could stomp on your opponent's head or body when they're on the ground. You can knee a down opponent. You were able to, do a lot of shit in Pride that you couldn't get away with nowadays in the unified rules of MMA, especially UFC and Bellator. But basically, Pride also had a system where there was no such thing as a 10-9. A normal Pride fight consisted of one 10-minute round and then two 5-minute rounds. And then if it goes to the judges, they don't do a point system. What they did was score the fight as a whole. So, let's say a fight went the distance. Let's say, I'm trying to think of two fighters who would have fought in Pride. I think these two did fight. Chuck Liddell and Quinn Rampage Jackson. I believe they did one of the Grand Prix in 2003, I think. Maybe 2000. No, I think it was 2003. But basically, let's say those two ended up going the distance. In reality, they didn't in the tournament that I'm thinking of, but for example's sake, let's say they went the distance. At the end of it, it wouldn't be, okay, this guy won round one, this guy won the next two rounds. It'd be, who did you think won the fight as a whole? So, basically, you could tell from, all the strikes that they threw as a whole, all the counters that they did as a whole, all the grapples that they did as a whole, not round by round. Because the 10-9 system also kind of, makes fighters chicken out a little. And it's like, okay, they'll only do what it takes to win the fight, basically. Like Floyd Mayweather, perfect example. He would kind of dance around the ring for the first 2 or 3 rounds, feeling out his opponent, do what he needed to do, and clinch and hug and not allow his opponent to get much offense in the middle rounds. And then late in the fight, clinch more, avoid his opponent, and he'd win. And I believe it was Johnny Hendricks versus Robbie Lawler 2, where I actually got fed up with something where, Hendricks not coming after Lawler in the last couple of rounds. I'm just thinking to myself, if you are a fucking champion of UFC, you have to go in there and you have to fucking fight. And guess what happened? Robbie Lawler ended up winning the title. Johnny Hendricks lost because a couple of judges felt like I did. You have to go out there and defend the fucking title. Not dance around and try to avoid your opponent and not, operate. You have to do shit. So I don't care if it's boxing or MMA for that matter. 10-9 must scoring system, in my opinion, bullshit. Shouldn't exist anymore. This is a perfect example of that. This judge right here. And some people have just, not wanted her to be a judge. I believe there was, I forget which promotion. I think it was Top Rank. Some Top Rank executives wanted her to not be appointed to the Lomachenko-Walters fight last year, and one of the top people of the promotion said, oh, here it is, Carl Maruetti of Top Rank, Vice President of Boxing Operation at the time, said, we respectfully requested that Bird not be assigned to the fight. From there, it went in on a conversation with Nevada State Athletic Commission Director Bob Bennett about how she is a good judge. Oh, speaking of which, Nevada State Athletic Commission, my God, they are one of the worst athletic commissions on the fucking planet. I mean, these are the people who tried to ban Wanderlei Silva for life for running away from a drug test, even though, as much as that's bad, he had never failed a drug test before. The same guys who tried to get Nick Diaz banned for 5 years for marijuana, but like his opponent, Anderson Silva, the fight that he got caught with, his opponent, Anderson Silva, tested positive for steroids. He got only 1 year. And the bottle throwing incident with Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz, and they tried to fine Conor McGregor a huge amount of money, and McGregor said, if that's going to be the case, I'm not going to fight in Vegas anymore. And I believe, if I remember correctly from watching Montage King videos, Montage King on YouTube, shout out to him, because his MMA videos are fucking awesome. And they're definitely worth binging. But basically, if I remember correctly, one of the directors was not reappointed because of that incident. So basically, they're terrible. They're just fucking terrible. They don't know what the fuck they're doing, even though, boxing and MMA in Vegas, it goes all hand in hand. It's fucking ridiculous sometimes how they can be, and I swear to God, why does Bird even have a license anymore? And actually, Stephen A. Smith and Teddy Atlas, and I've talked to Teddy Atlas before. Teddy Atlas is a great guy, but Teddy Atlas went into a fucking rage because of shit like this. And Stephen A. even was angry about Bird scoring. But where those two actually had a disagreement with, from my understanding of hearing about what happened, I think it was Teddy tried to essentially call out, and I can't believe I might have to side with Teddy here, but I might have to side with Teddy here about corruption. There may have been something corrupt. And if there wasn't anything corrupt, then, as I said, why does Bird even have a license anymore? She shouldn't have a fucking license. She should be banned from judging, period. Stephen A's little quote, you should be banned from talking basketball. Judge Bird, you should be banned from judging boxing and mixed martial arts events for life. That's how I feel. It just baffles me sometimes how these people can, suddenly judge a fight. And people on Twitter blew up about this, by the way. Let's see, 118. Here's some cool tweets. 118, 110 Canelo? Question mark, exclamation question mark from Mauro Ranallo. Shamatikar Sandhu at Sandhu MMA says, seriously though, the judge who had Canelo 10 rounds should never be allowed to judge a fight again, and then posted a gif of a bunch of people walking with bells. I guess this is a Game of Thrones thing or some other thing I don't know about. And some woman is walking, I think, and a bunch of people are ringing bells, or at least she's ringing her bell, and it's like, shame, shame, shame. And it's just, there's this one account, at MMA Roasted, and they were great. They posted a couple of these. Adelaide Bird scored the Apollo Creed versus Ivan Drago fight for Creed. Adelaide Bird has Blockbuster Video beating Netflix. It's great. I mean, the fight, it's like I said before, as I hinted at before, it's sad, because this fight should be remembered for a great match between Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez, but it's going to be remembered for that terrible scorecard. But you know what? There was a lot of money going into this match, this anticipated fight, and there's going to be a lot more money going into the rematch, I can say for certain. And I guess the likes of Billy Joe Saunders will have to wait. Billy Joe Saunders, he was another middleweight champion in boxing. The only title, I believe, not on the line in that Golovkin-Alvarez fight was the WBO middleweight championship, which Billy Joe Saunders holds. He retained against Willie Monroe Jr. on Saturday, and it was ugly. I'm just going to be honest. Neither fighter wanted to lead. I guess these fighters don't have a history of leading the fight. But basically it was trying to go the other into going first. And I'm a guy who actually likes a good fight, like a brawl, like Golovkin-Alvarez. And that you did not get that with Saunders and Monroe. But you did get something interesting. for those of you who were following that fight, Saunders' son punched Willie Monroe below the belt at their official weigh-in, and after the fight, Saunders brought his son into the ring, and Saunders' son faced Monroe, and over the microphone said, "I'm sorry for punching you in the nuts." Like, apologetically. It was like, what a statement from that kid, but, I'm just happy there was an apology, and it's like, okay, everything's good now, but I guess he and, I think there's another IBF middleweight, somebody won an IBF middleweight title eliminator, I think, around the weekend of Mayweather versus McGregor. Those two, I guess, are going to have to wait to fight, for middleweight titles, because there's just got to be a rematch. Golovkin versus Canelo, I think there's got to be another match. We need a decisive winner, and we need a scorecard that's not freaking 118-110 in favor of Canelo. By the way, that's going to replace the 28-3. You know how we had 3-1 leads and 28-3 leads and 10-9 GSP, referencing the GSP Johnny Hendricks fight, after which GSP went on the hiatus. Yeah, all that's out the window. Now it's going to be fucking 118-110 Canelo. That's all gone. Alright, so I know I spent a lot of time on that boxing stuff, but let's just quickly now focus on some of what happened this past week in mixed martial arts. So you know how Mike Goldberg has his little phrase, "It is all over." Well, they might be saying that for Jon Jones' career next. Jon Jones, who defeated Daniel Cormier at UFC 214, it was supposed to be the start of an epic comeback. Jon Jones had changed for good, turned against his old ways, and was now coming back. And he won the Light Heavyweight Championship. He was going to be the king of the UFC's Light Heavyweights again. And now both his samples from that event have come back positive. They have both tested positive. He's failed the drug test yet again. And now Jon Jones is no longer the UFC Light Heavyweight Champion. His amazing win at UFC 214, now overturned to a no contest. And Daniel Cormier is still your UFC Light Heavyweight Champion. I guess it would have to be a still, right? Because it would have to be an overturn from and new to and still, because it was ruled a no contest. Yeah, so Daniel Cormier's reign is actually now at 849 days. And still only 2 title defenses and a no contest to show for it. That's not to mean to knock Daniel Cormier. I'm just saying, it's sad. Because Jon Jones was holding it for 1,501 days. He had 8 title defenses. He was pretty much the king of the division. And he was going to have such big things. Even after he won the title for a second time in the redemption match. Basically, he had big plans going. He was going to, possibly move up to heavyweight. He was possibly going to have a big money match with Brock Lesnar. I guess in another Lesnar, one-off kind of appearance to UFC. But all of that seems to be for naught now. Because now Jon Jones faces a potential 4-year ban from MMA. Because this is his second violation. Of course, last year he was suspended a year for an anti-doping violation. Now he might be suspended for up to 4. And he's about 30 years old right now, so he'll be about 34 when the suspension is up, maybe 35. At that point, why would Jon Jones even be in UFC anymore? He wouldn't have thought, in 4 years, it's like, is he even going to be the Jon Jones we once knew? Absolutely not. So, is there a point in even continuing to fight? I mean, Bellator might pick him up, but at that point, should the UFC just cut its losses and just say, we're done with Jon Jones? Because Jon Jones, it's true what they said in all the hype up to UFC 214. Jon Jones' true enemy is himself. He is the only one he can really defeat. Well, and Steve Mazzagatti can disqualify him for illegal elbows, which aren't technically, illegal. Maybe they weren't intentional elbows, rather, but he was trying to finish the fight, and Mazzagatti asked Hamill, who was deaf, if he was able to continue. So there's just some stupidity there. So not counting that, Jon Jones hadn't been finished in his whole MMA career, and, you know, like I said, he has imploded on himself. This is the third year in a row Jon Jones has been stripped of a championship, which I think is kind of unheard of for the UFC. In 2015, he was stripped of his Light Heavyweight Championship after the little hit-and-run incident where he ran into a pregnant lady's car. He was driving. He hit a pregnant woman's car. Pregnant woman broke her arm, and he took off and evaded police for a while. Then the next year, of course, Jones and Cormier were supposed to have their big rematch at UFC 200, July 2016. Daniel Cormier was the champion. He had overtaken as champion after Jones's first indefinite suspension and stripping of the title, as I said, for that hit-and-run incident. Jones was the interim champion. They were going to have their big meeting, and then a couple of days before the event, Jones tested positive. He failed the drug test. He was off the card and suspended a year. So this was supposed to be the big third fight, the big, you know, showdown of sorts. The big, you know, let me prove it to myself and to the world. I can be back on top. And it seemed like, you know, he was proving his case. It seemed like maybe, just maybe, like I doubted him. I said he hadn't fought in a while. He wasn't the Jon Jones. When he fought Alvin St. Preux to win the interim title in 2016, he wasn't the same Jon Jones. He was not acting like he used to. Basically, I was saying, you know, Jones might be fucked here. But he managed to knock out Cormier in the third round. So credit to him. And I'm like, okay. And he was emotional in the ring. He was on his knees, on the ground, with tears in his eyes, basically talking about how, you know, this was a change. And he was so happy to be back. He called out Brock Lesnar, and it's like, you know what, Jon? Maybe, just maybe, I might believe you. You might have won me over. And now this is a case where I hate to say I told you so, but if you've been following me and mixed martial arts and my talks, you know, Cheap Seat Sports and Unspoken Podcast, I kind of told you so. Because I said that fight, a lot of people are saying that Jones versus Cormier fight, Cormier had more to prove because he had lost the first fight to Jones in early 2015. I disagree with that. I said it has to be Jones because Jones has been the one who's had the violations. Jones is the one who's basically acted like a prick for the last 3 years and run himself into the ground in MMA world, rather. And, you know, it was up to Jones to make good and redo everything and start from scratch. And it looked like he was on his way to that, and he fucked up again. So now Jon Cormier has asked for, you know, nobody to mention anything about Jones and to show compassion stuff, but I just gotta get my case out there. It's just, man, if Jon Jones has shot himself in the foot more times than I can imagine. He has shot himself in the foot so much that foot probably has to be amputated. It's honestly amazing how the hell he could screw his life up like this. He was on top of the world. He had the world in the palm of his fucking hand. And he screwed this up. And there's like cries of conspiracy. There's cries of, you know, it was accidental. And I mean, it's like, I guess you have the due process stuff, but it's like, you know, like this is the third time he would be suspended. The third time he's been stripped of a title, and the second time he would have an anti-doping thing. It's like, at what point, you know, boy who cried wolf syndrome is basically what I'm trying to say. It's like, at what point is it just become too much to the point where it's like, I can no longer believe this man because I can no longer believe Jon Jones. He swears on his children and on God and on his family that he would never take steroids. And it's like, at some point, I just got to say it. Jon Jones, I don't believe you. I honestly don't believe you. So, we've got all that to play out, which is going to be fun. UFC also held UFC Fight Night Pittsburgh last night. I guess trying to go head-to-head with Canelo and Golovkin. And Luke Rockhold returned to the ring. Luke Rockhold, it was his first fight in 15 months. It was his first fight since losing the UFC Middleweight Championship to Michael Bisping back at UFC 199 in June of 16. And Rockhold fought David Branch, former WSOF Middleweight and Light Heavyweight Champion, who was on an amazing roll. And Rockhold managed to actually get Branch taken down and managed to get David Branch to tap out due to strikes. Amazingly. Branch basically rocked Rockhold hard in the beginning, and he got a takedown, got some knees, and he got some good clinches in, good jabs in. Rockhold got some knees in. Rockhold got a takedown on Branch himself, and then Branch in the second round came out, but Rockhold clinched, got him down, got him into full mount. Branch gave up his back, thought maybe Rockhold would go for a choke, but no, Rockhold decided to strike away, and then David Branch quickly tapped out. So Luke Rockhold is victorious in his UFC return, and he called out Bisping. Essentially, he wants the title back. After that performance, he was still a little shaky, so I don't really think Rockhold should, have a title match right away. He shouldn't have a rematch for the title. I mean, Bisping also still has to worry about George St. Pierre at UFC 217 in Madison Square Garden this coming November. So there's some stuff that's got to be worked out there. But Rockhold, I don't think is ready yet. I think he's got to have a couple more fights with more of MMA's best middleweights. There was also a lot of knockouts on this show. Mike Perry with a nice knockout of Alex Reyes. Anthony Smith beating Hector Lombard, which I have to call an upset. Kamaru Usman, a nice knockout over Sergio Moraes. Uriah Hall with an amazing knockout of Christoph Jocko. And that was a very good fight, I feel. Daniel Spitz with a TKO win over Anthony Hamilton in just 24 seconds. It was kind of out of nowhere. It was amazing. And Gilbert Burns over Jason Sago by knockout. So, a bunch of nice finishes on this card. It wasn't that bad of a card. It wasn't, worthy, in my opinion, of competing against Gennady Golovkin versus Canelo Alvarez, but it was still a very good card. And we also have a couple of news items. Next week's in UFC Japan, they announced this on the UFC Pittsburgh show. Shogun Rua is out of that. He's basically out. Something happened. I think he was injured. Shogun Rua not competing in UFC Japan's main event. He was supposed to face Alvin St. Preux, but now he will be replaced by a man named Yushin Okami, who competed in the UFC between 2006 and 2013. Okami has victories over Mike Swick, Evan Tanner, Mark Munoz, Nick Marquardt, and Hector Lombard. He received a UFC middleweight title shot against Anderson Silva back in 2011. He lost, however. He's also faced Chael Sonnen and Ronaldo Souza. He had a bunch of fights in WSOF, including a title match against David Branch. So that should be something interesting. They also officially announced for UFC 216, the next pay-per-view on October 7th, Johnson Borg for the flyweight title has been rescheduled. I was right in my prediction that will probably be rescheduled for that card. So that flyweight title match, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, Ray Borg, UFC 216, October 7th, along with interim lightweight championship title match between Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee. The winner might be facing Conor McGregor, or unless Conor McGregor is going to have a title match with somebody else first, like a Nate Diaz of sorts. But things should be exciting. Speaking of UFC Japan, let's take a look at the UFC Japan card for next week. Not UFC Japan Ultimate Japan, or aka UFC 15 and a half, for those of you who are big, mixed martial arts fans who, appreciate all the old events that were going on and stuff. It's now UFC Fight Night, St. Preux versus Okami instead of St. Preux Shogun 2. Kind of disappointing, but, I guess I gotta go with it. As I said, Alvin St. Preux versus Yushin Okami, light heavyweight main event. You also got a women's strawweight match between Claudia Gadelha and Jessica Andrade. Lightweight bout between Takanori Gomi and Dong Hyun Kim. I got also the preliminary card for Fight Pass. You also have a welterweight match. It's just one match on Fight Pass this coming weekend. Daichi versus Hyunju Lim. But other than that, I believe in the States it's going to be on Friday night, the 22nd. Everywhere else in the world, most other places in the world, it'd be the 23rd, Saturday. For Eastern Standard Time, it's supposed to start at, I believe, 8 o'clock, with the main card starting at 10, like a normal fight night. It would just be on FXX, and that's all the preliminary matches except for A versus Lim and the main card. All of it will be on FXX on Friday night, the 22nd, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Everywhere else, check your local listings, so that should be good. And, of course, the pay-per-view after UFC 216 is UFC 217, the big Madison Square Garden event. Michael Bisping versus GSP main eventing, along with Cody Garbrandt versus TJ Dillashaw. Joanna Violence against Rose Namajunas. Those are three big title fights. We also got Stephen Thompson, Jorge Masvidal. Mickey Gall's going to be in action for the first time since defeating Sage Northcutt. Mickey Gall is undefeated in professional MMA and UFC. Beating Sage Northcutt and CM Punk. Curtis Blades, who I think is a good up-and-comer in the heavyweight division, he's going to be fighting. Jan Cutelaba is going to be fighting. Corey Anderson's going to be fighting. And Johnny Hendricks is going to be fighting. The fat fuck. For those of you who don't know Unspoken Podcast and Soul stuff, on the second episode, I basically ranted about this guy. He's Johnny Hendricks. It's like, basically, he fought for the UFC Welterweight Championship in 2013. He lost to George St. Pierre. I thought I alluded to that before when I was talking about the 10-9 system. Basically, after that, as I hinted at, he won the title. He won when it was vacated. He ended up losing in his first defense to Robbie Lawler, like I said, because he wasn't exactly doing his best work there in that fight. He was supposed to fight Tyron Woodley at 170, and ended up missing weight and having to go to the hospital for an intestinal blockage. He blamed it on deer meat and said he was on nutrition. And then before UFC 200, he missed weight. He missed weight by 1/4 pound, ended up losing the fight. He ended up going up against Neil Magny at UFC 207, and before the fight, he was talking about how basically the media was ridiculing him for missing weight, but he was like so close. He was ridiculously close to making weight. It wasn't even funny, and he was basically ripping at the media for poking at his weight issue. And he ended up missing weight and losing the fight again. So, see, he's just a fat piece of shit. Oh, and by the way, he did move up to middleweight, and he did get a win in his debut, which is fine. And then he missed weight at middleweight and ended up losing back in June. So, I'm sorry, I'm not a Johnny Hendricks fan. I was big back in 2013, 2014, and not anymore. Hendricks can go fuck himself. So there's my take on everything. So before we go, let me briefly touch more into the world of professional wrestling. So this week, I binge-watched a little thing on the WWE Network called The Mae Young Classic. For those of you who've been sleeping under a rock, the WWE put on a 32-woman tournament consisting of women from NXT and, for most part, the independents. They aired the tournament on the network from late August to a special live finale on the WWE Network that took place this past Tuesday. And I thought it was a pretty good tournament. If you're looking to compare it to the Cruiserweight Classic, I don't know if we can do that. I mean, to me, that's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, because one's focusing on women's wrestling, and these women came in all shapes and sizes and had different styles. I mean, you had Piper Niven from Scotland, who was a powerhouse. You had the likes of Princesa Suhei from Mexico, who was a lucha star. And you had the likes of Serena Deeb, who is a multi-year veteran. Actually, was in the WWE before. And then you have Shayna Baszler, who came over from mixed martial arts. So there's a whole... Actually, and there was one woman who... The first round match she had was her first ever professional match ever. So you had a whole slew of different people, different women from various backgrounds, various countries, as I said, various styles. So everything kind of clashed. It was a good, really good tournament that they put on. It's not like I said, the Cruiserweight Classic, because of course that's, as much as it's, you can say one's straight in like Lucha Libre, one's from Japan and such, they're all high flyers, all 205 pounds or less. This was very different. This was about, the women's revolution, per se, in WWE. The commentators for this tournament, by the way, were Jim Ross and Lita. I thought it was one of those commentary teams where it was like, I thought it was a little shaky at first, but as the tournament went along, it seemed to get better. Of course, JR is a living legend, and Lita, I think was the first... I know Lita does some stuff on the network, but I think this was this her first time commentating wrestling since, Sunday Night Heat? That's the thing, I know she did, stuff on the network. She does stuff on, the pre-show panels and takeover panels, but the last time I remember Lita doing something like this, commentating actual wrestling matches, I think it was that time when she was injured with the broken neck. God, that brings me back. I just had a God, I'm old moment. I'm only 22, going to be 23 in a couple of months. But just, I don't want to get into every single match and review every single thing, but I'm just going to note some stuff that, I liked, note some stuff that I didn't like. So and any names, that kind of stuck out to me. So, Jazzy Gabert versus Abby Laith from episode 1, I thought was a hell of a match. I liked the story they were telling there. Jazzy Gabert, this German, powerful woman, strong, and she was pretty much making Abby Laith her toy. And Abby Laith is, she actually was trained by the ones who were mentored by Mae Young, I believe. I think that's what the story was. It was Mae Young and whoever was trained by Mae Young, and then those trainees trained Abby Laith. They had this segment where it was not segment, but they were going on this thing where, as I said, Jazzy was pretty much wiping the floor with Laith, and then she goes for a move. Laith does the alligator clutch that Mae Young was famous for, and Laith actually got the win with it. So that was actually a really... I liked the story. I wasn't sure where they were going with it at first, but then I saw what was going on. I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty neat. Shayna Baszler, and I believe it was it Zeta who was the... no, that was... or was that Xia Li who had the first fight? Their first ever match in professional wrestling. I think that was Xia Li. But Shayna Baszler did first appear on the premiere episode, and Shayna Baszler, for those of you who don't know, Shayna Baszler actually comes from the world of mixed martial arts, and she is a part of the 4 horsewomen of MMA. Of course, that consists of Shayna Baszler, Ronda Rousey, Jessamyn Duke, I believe, and one more. Jessamyn Duke and Marina Shafir. That's who, Marina Shafir. So those are the 4 who have dubbed themselves the 4 horsewomen, and there is something that happened in the tournament that I'll get to. But basically, Shayna Baszler made her debut, and I was actually pretty impressed. She was pretty dominant. And yes, it was Jai Lee. I was just checking to make sure. It was Jai Lee who actually faced Mercedes Martinez in episode 2. That was making her first ever professional, match. Had her first professional match. But Shayna Baszler did win her match by submission. Serena Deeb, I actually didn't know was the Serena from the Straight Edge Society all those years ago, and then got fired for, quote, not living up to the gimmick or whatever it was, which I found stupid, but unless it was, not dealing with alcohol correctly, meaning, alcohol abuse, I'm not sure on the details of that, but it was good to see Serena getting, essentially a second chance, and I was fine with her. Vanessa Bourne was okay. She didn't exactly win me over. She wasn't my favorite, but she was fine. Nothing wrong there. Other people that I had to take note of in the first round, the Rachel Evers Marty Bell match. I was not hoping to see, a match that I would hate on either the Cruiserweight Classic or this tournament, but my God, that match was terrible. Neither one could really sell for shit, especially Bell. But the thing is, Bell has a lot more years experience than Evers. So, shame on Bell for that performance. I mean, anybody can have an off night, but dear God, why did it have to be that night? If that was just an off night, I mean, I guess that's one thing, but if this is just her, then basically she blew her opportunity. I don't think WWE should be... When you're doing the post-tournament signings, the WWE should not be signing Marty Bell. I'm sorry. That was terrible. Absolutely terrible. Shad Lee, I mean, it was her first professional match in professional wrestling, but, it was her first match, so she really didn't, do much, and she actually did end up losing to Mercedes Martinez. Candice LeRae, the wife of Johnny Gargano, competed. Mia Yim was actually very impressive. Sarah Logan versus Mia Yim, by the way, in episode... I think that was episode 2. Fair match. Also, double thumbs up. That was incredible. If I can recommend some matches from this tournament, definitely Jessica Baer versus Abby Leith. Definitely Sarah Logan versus Mia Yim, pardon me. I guess Piper Nevin's fight with Santana Garrett too. And Dakota Kai, I love Dakota Kai. For those of you who don't follow the indie circuit too much, Dakota Kai was actually known as Evie. And she actually was a part of several streams of a couple of Twitch streamers that I love, New Legacy Inc. Shout out to them. And, she truly showed why she is the big dog in the ring, because she had an impressive performance, not just in the first round, but the tournament itself. And Kairi Sane, I was actually very, very impressed with as well. Abby Leith versus Rachel Evers, that's also a good fight that people need to watch. Princess Suhei versus Mercedes Martinez, I thought that was fine as well. Shayna Baszler versus Mia Yim, I definitely enjoyed that match. Serena Deeb versus Piper Niven, that's also a must-watch. Toni Storm actually wasn't winning me over. It was like a slow build. She was with the Aisha Raymond match. Then when she was battling Lacey Evans, started liking her more. Really liked her with the Storm Nevin match in the quarterfinals. That's definitely another must-watch. I would say everything from the quarterfinals on is also must-watch. The Final 8, I think they got the Final 8 perfect. Abby Leith, Mercedes Martinez, Candice LeRae, Shayna Baszler, Kairi Sane, Dakota Kai, Piper Niven, and Toni Storm. I think they nailed that. It was perfect. Mercedes Martinez getting the win over Abby Leith kind of shocked me. I would think Abby Leith, they would continue it until the semifinals where she'd lose to Baszler. The Kairi Sane Dakota Kai match, I was head over heels with. I loved it. Sucks to see Evie, aka Dakota Kai, get eliminated. But at least she did lose to the champion, and the final 8 women put on a hell of a performance. I'm very happy with that. And if you did not watch the Mae Young Classic, I'm recommending you now. Even though I just spoiled the results for you, well, you should have watched it. And you know what? Still, go watch it. Please. It's amazing. It's definitely something worth watching. It's binge-worthy. It's even more than binge-worthy. I love this thing that WWE's doing. Like last year they did Cruiserweight Classic. This year they're doing the Mae Young Classic. I hope these tournaments keep continuing. Before we go, just a quick rundown of what's going on in the cards for No Mercy. Right now confirmed Brock Lesnar, Braun Strowman for the Universal title. John Cena vs. Roman Reigns. Ambrose Rollins, Cesaro Sheamus for the Raw Tag titles. Bliss Banks, Jax and Emma, 4-way for the Raw Women's title. Balor Wyatt, and Neville Enzo for the Cruiserweight title. So we've got quite a bit going on already for No Mercy. The go-home show is tonight with Monday Night Raw. So that should be fun. And we also have Hell in a Cell coming up as well. Only confirmed for that so far is Shane McMahon and Owens in Hell in a Cell, and Mahal Nakamura for the WWE title. So there's your brief look into the world of wrestling. And that's going to do it for this edition of Combat Mania. Go follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope at Combat Mania UD. Also, follow the Unspoken Podcast, my other podcast I do with Nick Federa, with sports like baseball, football, etc., at the UDUP on Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, personally, at Thomas J. Albano. And don't forget to like and subscribe to all the other Undetermined Podcast Network accounts. And don't forget to give us a subscription on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes as well. And it's going to wrap things up here. I'm Tom Albano, and thank you all for tuning in once again to Combat Mania, Cheap Seat Sports production, part of the Undetermined Podcast Network. We'll see you next week for episode 3. Until then, take care, everybody.